Welcome to episode 46 of the Cancer Pod. On today's episode, we talk to Amy and Stef, who you may know as the co-hosts of the podcast Cancer for Breakfast. Join us as we talk about everything from building community to virtual reality. So stick around.
I'm Dr. Tina Kaiser, and as Leah likes to say, I'm the sciencey one.
And I'm Dr. Leah Sherman, and I'm the Cancer Insider.
And we're two naturopathic doctors who practice integrative cancer care.
But we're not your doctors.
This is for education, entertainment, and informational purposes only.
Do not apply any of this information without first speaking to your doctor.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast by the hosts and their guests are solely their own.
Welcome to the Cancer Pod. Hey, Tina.
Hi, Leah.
I don't even know what to say. We are sitting virtually in a room with two of my favorite people, the co-hosts of definitely my favorite podcast. We've got Amy and Stef from Cancer for Breakfast with us. I'm not even going to do any banter beforehand. I just want every possible minute to talk to these two because I'm a super fan.
Wow.
And for people who aren't familiar with Cancer for Breakfast, it is a podcast for anyone who's had a cancer diagnosis. And I have to say that it's been my support group. It's been my, I don't know. It's like I found my people. I don't know how to explain how I feel when I listen to this podcast. So, yeah, it makes me feel so much less alone. I laugh, I cry, I get lost when I'm driving because I'm listening so intently. Yeah, I will go on and on if I could, and I'm not going to because I want to talk to them. But
yeah, I didn't want to step on that. Just let you keep going and going and going and going. You can gush about us all day long.
Anytime.
The gush goes directly right back to you, though. We love the Cancer Pod. From the very beginning, we're so excited. We discovered you on Instagram before we'd ever listened. And I think Steph wrote you a message being like, welcome to the podcast club, buddies. I'm like,
yeah.
And then we listened. We're like, oh, it's actually really, really good. And exactly.
We have a mutual admiration society.
Yes.
And that's why we're here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
We'll have you on our show too coming up.
That'll be fun. I remember when Steph sent that message and it made me feel again welcome. It was just like, this is so cool. We've been seen,
Oh God.
Oh, yeah. That's something that really bothers me about the podcasting world in general is that, I come from the nonprofit sphere where there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of camaraderie, and I don't find that as much in podcasting. And I try to bring it, whenever I can. I'm not disingenuous, but I so respect you guys. And I was so excited to see professionals with a fun spin showing up to put in time and build community and stuff. So yeah, we're super fans of yours too. And I love listening, and I'm so excited that we're here on your podcast.
A fun spin on cancer. That is what we all strive for.
That's gonna be our next t-shirt. We don't have any t-shirts. That'll be our first t-shirt.
I will buy the first one.
So I want to know how you guys got together and created your podcast. How did you find each other? How did you decide to go and create the podcast and create the community around Cancer for Breakfast? How did that evolve?
Yeah, I'll tell them. So I was in the midst of being diagnosed, and my very best friend in the whole wide world said, I have this friend who is just finishing up cancer treatment, and I think that you would really hit it off. And so she introduced me to Amy, and indeed we did hit it off.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that immediate, I imprinted on her like a little baby duckling because she was my first cancer friend.
Well, you were not my first cancer friend by any means, or the first person I walked through a diagnosis. This would happen to me frequently. I mean, 4 or 5 times probably within that year.
Amy knows everybody, by the way.
No, just everybody has cancer. So I'm just kidding. No, but I would get calls saying, my friend, can you talk to her? Can you let her know, like, who's your surgeon, whatever. And we would kind of go through it, and I would make real friends with some of them, and others would go on through the thing. But with Steph, it's just like, we just never stopped texting every day. We just kept going. And then we joked about writing a book together about the cancer experience. And then one of us said, well, let's just do a podcast. And then we started recording without ever speaking on the phone. That's one of the weird things about our connection, is we didn't even know if we had a good rapport.
Right.
Yeah. And it worked out.
But it rolled so fast. We are both creative people, and I feel like it was like 2 weeks maybe into our friendship that we were making these jokes about collaborating on something. And as soon as we said, how about a podcast? It was like the next day we were making our husbands fish out the microphones and the mixers and setting up our little home studios. And we did talk for the very first time with our voices on the first episode of our podcast. So it was so cool that it just happened, that we have great chemistry. And now, of course, our friendship encompasses so much more than cancer, but it's been really cool to build this community with Amy because we have different strengths. Amy is just like such a people person and is totally the heart and soul of the podcast, with reaching out to people and making sure everybody's okay. And she'll be the one that says, like, we haven't heard from so-and-so in a while. Should I send them a message? And I'm the one who's like the fervent researcher who wants to, learn about all the science and update people on what's new. And so I don't know. I feel like we've got a great formula, and I love working with Amy. So it works out for me.
It's kind of funny, when we first originally did the first couple of episodes, we were going to switch off. So for people that don't know Cancer for Breakfast, we do some chatting in the first segment. We read letters from listeners. And then Steph does a segment called RATS, which stands for Recent Advances in Treatment and Science. And it is awesome because we always end on this positive note of really cool stuff going on in cancer research, cancer treatment, just advances, right?
Mm-hmm.
But originally we were going to switch off. So one episode she'd read the letters and I would do the RATS. And then when it came down to it, and if you listen to the episode, you'll understand why that would never work out. Like, Steph was born to do RATS, and like I tried to do it, and I was like, so like there's like this guy in like Belgium, I think, or something. It was just like, that's not my strength. I need to read the letters, do the gossip, like get into the interpersonal minds of the cancer patient. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're kind of that same way, Tina, where for the episodes where I don't really know a lot about what we're going to talk about, and I do all this research, and then you can hear when I start to talk about it, I'm boring. Like, it's not, it's because it's not, no, but it's because it's not as easy to talk about as the personal experiences are, like the things that I'm more comfortable with.
I'm the Leia and Steph's the Tina, but I think that we need each other to balance out. And I also think that, Leia, you are so knowledgeable. But absolutely. The humanity, I don't know. Gush.
It's just not my, it's just not my, like, it's not my thing. I'm more, which is weird that I'm the more touchy-feely one, because I'm not really a touchy-feely person, but I guess I am now.
Cancer changes
Cancer
you.
will change you. Yep.
Frickin' cancer.
Yeah, I think it has to do with like who you are as a person and where your passions lie. So Steph and I geek out on, on the science part, and we get passionate about it, and that's why we like to talk about it. And you guys are people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was always an events organizer by trade, or a party planner of sorts. And now I still do that, but it is with cancer people. I organize support groups in Portland. If anyone listening is a breast cancer person, a young, quote unquote young, we're not crazy about that strictness, but Gen X and down. We have a metastatic group that I started for younger women with Mets breast cancer. And then I kind of have taken over more of an organizational role with just the early stage group in town. So I'll tell you where to go.
Cool. We can put some links to it.
Yeah, great.
Oh yeah, we'll put that in our show notes. But I do appreciate you including Gen X as young.
Well, I think that there's just a different kind of cultural literacy that goes with Gen X, like
Yeah.
we have more in common as Gen Xers and millennials and stuff than I think like most people who are getting breast cancer in their 60s, 70s have
And
in
the
common.
groups that serve them, right? Like,
right, totally.
our style is a little bit less of the like pink warrior survivor type of group, right? Not that we look down on that at all, but I think that that doesn't speak to a certain demographic of people, including a lot of Gen Xers. And it turns them away from community. Sometimes they don't want to go do the fun run and meet the ladies for the, pink brunch or whatever. So I think offering something else, you're going to be able to like talk a little smack with some people and
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I don't want to generalize, but I do think that at least the circles in which I travel, humor is such an important part
right.
of how we communicate. I even explained that today when I went to get a biopsy. I was talking to the tech and said, I deal with stress using sarcasm and humor. So,
Yeah.
this is what you got to deal with.
Good for you for just saying that up front too. Don't you find that in like a medical setting, sometimes when you just like lay it out there, then it like gives you the permission to fill the space with whatever you need to feel comfortable? And before cancer, I never would have done that. I just would have been like, I can feel uncomfortable for a little while. I can just hold on to this for a minute and then get out of here. But you kind of learn you have to do whatever you have to do in any medical appointment.
Yeah, when you're going through something so invasive, I feel like you just have to reclaim your dignity somehow,
Yeah.
And if that's with humor, if that's with chatting up your tech, or if it's, with playing the music that you like in your scan, I don't know. I really think it's important to move through this whole experience with as much authenticity as you can, because otherwise you just bottle it up and you let it out on your family and friends instead.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm going to ask, are you okay? Like, why did you have a biopsy?
Oh, I had something show up on an MRI. They were looking at something in my left foob because I don't know, like nobody talks about these. This is what happens. Nobody talks about these things. So when you have just an implant after a mastectomy, there are weird sensations that are felt. Scraping, nerves, all this stuff. So I was having all of these sensations, and when I followed up with my oncologist, we decided that I'd get another MRI. And so I came back up here and I got the MRI looking at the left breast, like focusing on it, and they saw something on the right side. And so I had to wait a couple weeks, and I just had my biopsy this morning. So yeah, I'll find out tomorrow, hopefully.
Oh, fingers crossed.
Good that you get to find out tomorrow. That's so good. You don't have to wait the torturous days.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that too. Like usually it's like a week, right? I mean, it's just like forever. And if it is a week, then I'm going to be losing my mind. But
you give us their phone number if it's more than 2 days.
Oh, I am going to sick you on them.
Steph will talk to your doctors and I'll talk to you. Like, I'll keep you calm. She'll crack the whip.
That's right.
Deal.
This is one thing I love about our support group. We have a Facebook group too that we created, with our listeners of the podcast. And one thing that I love about it, and just about cancer support groups in general, getting peer-to-peer support, is when you tell somebody that they found something on an MRI, they found something on your mammogram, they, whatever. I feel like cancer people are the least likely to be like, it's okay, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it. Cancer
that
people
happened to my aunt and she's fine.
Yeah, but cancer people are more likely to be like, oh, that sucks. Like, how are you feeling? How are you coping? Can I have dinner delivered? Like, we get it, and we know how it feels to be in that like liminal space of worry and fear. Even if you're pretty optimistic, it's still uncertain, and that can be so tough. And it doesn't really help anybody when you're hit with that like shiny optimism right in your face.
But at the same time, sometimes when that optimism is coming from another cancer patient, you can actually believe it because you know they're not just blowing air up your whatever, like, oh, like if I say, oh, a girl in my support group did have that with her FOOB and did have this thing, and like a very specific thing that you might not know happens in a certain situation. Sometimes, that's one of the benefits of support groups to me, is finding out all the inside symptoms and different things that are common that maybe your doctor doesn't have time to tell you because all they care about, your oncologist, is like saving your life.
I love getting all of this information from other people because I'm constantly passing on to patients like, yes, I've heard this before. This is normal. This is, this is not.
Oftentimes I hear in groups somebody saying that their oncologist says that couldn't be a symptom of this medication or that they haven't heard of that. And then you go to a support group and 3 people are like, oh yeah, that totally happened to me, but it went away after about 6 months, like I'm taking the same thing. And then you're like, my oncologist doesn't know any,
Not your oncologist.
Not mine.
Not ours. I actually really love that about my oncologist because a few times she has said just outright, there aren't studies to support this, but I have anecdotally heard that from patients. And I think, we're talking about something, I don't want to exclude like men and non-binary and trans people from the breast cancer conversation because obviously everybody gets breast cancer. But I think, something that's largely a women's health issue, we're only looking at like maybe 40 years of valid, legit research that's usable and applicable. And so much research takes a really long time. So you don't necessarily have great data for these kinds of things. And it's really important to, in the absence of hard science, have people to talk to who have been through what you're going through, who can validate your experience or give you tips about what might help. Because I can go to my oncologist and say, hey, I have like raging diarrhea from my Verzenio, and she can prescribe something to me. But somebody else might say, hey, like, have you tried, like, do you by any chance eat like this brand of granola bar? And I'll be like, what? Yes. And they'll be like, it has this ingredient in it. It's just, I think that it's priceless to have that peer support. And, that's why it's so important for us to have our support groups. I'm doing this thing where I'm creating a breast cancer support bus that I am going to be using for mobile support groups and things like that. Because
it is so cute. This bus she's built.
Thank you.
So awesome.
And you can follow it on Instagram.
Yeah, people can follow it on Instagram. It's not moving just yet. We're waiting for some signage and an awning. But yeah, I mean, I think that people are more open with peers. They're more likely to give peers the honest truth. And also, like, a lot of people are super triggered by going to the hospital, and hospitals are where a lot of support groups meet. And so I'm trying to just break down some of those barriers to finding community that cancer people face. 'Cause I live in rural Washington State, and there are tons of people. Like, breast cancer affects so many people, as we all know. And if you live like way out in the sticks and the nearest hospital to you is, a half an hour away, and they don't even offer support groups, but they can like give you a pamphlet on a support group that you have to drive to another hour and a half. Like, that's not something you're going to probably seek out. You're not going to follow up. So I don't know. I will preach all day long about the importance of finding your people. And whether that's like a podcast that you love and you can write into and have the hosts write back and care about you as a person, or if it's a mobile support group or if it's an online support group. I just think it's so important.
Or just online other cancer people who are posting about their experience, and you can connect with them if they have the same type of cancer you have. I think that's just awesome. There's so many people that are putting themselves out there and really, really doing it so they can connect with other people going through it. It's pretty awesome.
And that was my experience with Instagram. Was I just started posting things because I didn't post anything on Facebook because I didn't want people from high school knowing my business, So I just started posting really kind of like random things on Instagram, and then I have found wonderful friends who one of them
Yeah.
I have actually met in person. The other one I hope to meet one day in person. She lives in New Zealand.
Oh, cool.
And, you just meet these incredible people who are like sending you messages. I've been stalking you. I wanted to know more about like, what does hair growth look like after
Mhm.
treatment and, all of these things. And yeah, Instagram, I think, was my first support group for sure. And I've been reluctant to join, I have to admit, the Facebook group,
Mhm.
but maybe I'll join.
Join. It's for any cancer person, no caretakers, no cancer adjacent people, but you could be any type of cancer. You could be through with your treatment. You could be somebody who is never going to be through with your treatment. You can be anything, any gender, anything. And it's kind of awesome to have all different types of cancer, I think, because it sort of takes away any sort of that people having all the answers to anything, and just gives more space for people sharing experiences and saying what they're going through, because everybody knows that everyone's situation is so different.
I have to say the name of the support group.
So if you just search for Cancer for Breakfast Club Crying in My Nightgown, you will find us. And it's a private group, so you have to answer a few questions and da-da-da-da. But I will say, when I was going through active treatment, and I was diagnosed in 2019, 2020 is when I was doing that stuff. And I was totally afraid of any sort of community. That's why I preach about it so much, because like I didn't find my people during the first half of my treatment. And I followed maybe 3 cancer accounts on Instagram that I never interacted with. I just kind of lurked a little bit because I didn't want, like you were saying, Leia, like my actual community in my real world where I'm not a cancer person to be seeing me. It's just too vulnerable for me. I'm just too controlled. But now that I'm completely dived in and have the podcast and everything, and I have 2 communities now, and that's great. But you get so scared that you're going to come across something that about your diagnosis in somebody else that's going to somehow tell you something awful. That's how I felt, at least. And so I stayed away. I was so triggered by any sort of bad news somebody else might have, when I felt like I was already on that roller coaster and so out of control myself that I just would hide. But it is that double-edged sword of community is sometimes scary, but when you're dealing with the scariest thing in the world, but it's so beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take full credit for Amy getting over that, but I do think that, Amy was my cancer bestie as I was getting diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. Like she was getting that in real time. It was like, I initially thought that I had stage 2. She was helping me process that. And then it became apparent that I was actually stage 4 and I had bone mets. And, she was getting a front row seat to the horror of getting diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And I think, like, obviously, I don't wish for people to go through that with their friends. I wish I could have shielded her from it a little bit more. But of course, I was way too much in my own head about it. But I do think there's something to be said for seeing that it's not an immediate death sentence. You're still a full, whole person with like a rich life. And this is just a thing that's happening to you. And I'm okay. I'm still here. Treatment is working. Everything's all right. And, I don't know how much, Amy, that really affected you. We've actually never talked about this. I think that's really weird.
Well, I will tell you, I do think it was really good for me. Your metastatic diagnosis was really good for me. No. But
It really helped you grow as a person.
well, I'll tell you one thing. So my diagnosis was stage 2B. I had a really 2 big tumors, actually, that were not in my lymph nodes. But I think that I became so afraid that I was going to become metastatic and that this roller coaster was going to kind of keep going. And one of my fears is that if that were to happen to me, I was afraid that people would like always only see the cancer, and that I would never ever get to be Amy, the party throwing events like the person who is just social and that's why people like her, not the cancer person, And Steph, when you were diagnosed, I had already fallen in love with you and I was already just there for whatever, and like seeing how nothing did change with me to you, like I didn't suddenly, you know what I mean? It's like, of course I think about it all the time and I hate that this has happened to you and it's a real thing, but it doesn't do anything of me wanting to back away from you because I'm afraid that I'm going to be sad if things, like it's not, fear doesn't matter for me. Like my love matters to me for you. And I think like realizing that other people could feel that way for me, if that comes down to it, did release my fear a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's something that we've talked about on our podcast too, is like the privilege of getting to walk alongside somebody as they're going through this is a big part of it. It's not just like charity when you're helping somebody out or in the support group when somebody's got it worse off than you and you're like commiserating with them. You're not doing them a favor necessarily. It's a two-way street. And I think that it's really cool to have an inside look into the most horrible parts of somebody's life. Amy actually coined this phrase that I love, and I want us to title our book this because it's so perfect to me. But Amy was like, I'm the best part of the worst part of your life.
I said it at first in a really sad way where I was like, I'm the best part of the worst part of her life. And then I was like, wait, I'm the best part of the worst part of her life. Like, what an honor,
Yeah. And I think that I don't want to be a bright sider or whatever because that's so annoying. But, of all the crappy, crummy things that cancer brings to your life, and they are like innumerable, obviously, I think that having a different perspective is just really, really cool. And having a different kind of community is also really, really cool.
This speaks to a challenge that I think anyone with a diagnosis of cancer has, and that is bringing that to their community and having people treat you differently, having people who know you see that before they see you. And whether you're going through treatment or you've gone through treatment or whatever state you're in, having people treat you differently is the fear of a lot of patients when I talk to them, and how people deal with that is so, the spectrum is huge as far as, either not telling people. I've had people not tell their
Right.
entire family. Like they
Yeah.
didn't tell their immediate relatives that they had cancer
Absolutely.
because they didn't want to share it. They don't want to be that person. They don't want, whatever their preconceptions were, that was their choice. So it's from my spot, I'm a clinician, and I feel like my job is to hold the space for the experience that someone is having at any given moment. It's not for me to say what's right or wrong. It's not for me to judge in any way, shape, or form, because who am I to say? So to me, it's a fascinating concept that cancer is this very different condition from anything else we talk about in our current society, right? It's the big C. It's so unique and comes with so much psychology wrapped around it that, just teasing it apart. I can see why support groups and even your Facebook group, creating an insular group where there is no one inside it who doesn't understand being there, makes a lot of sense. I also would love for the teaching aspect of that. Like, what would be the most appropriate exchange for someone who first hears that you had a diagnosis? Because we know all the inappropriate reactions.
Yeah.
Whole episode.
I was going to say, there's dozens and dozens of them. There is a nonprofit called the letter B present, and it's for people to support young people who have been diagnosed with cancer and how to go about that. And it's called Be Present because it's specifically for people who are their loved ones or their peers who don't have any cancer diagnosis or any knowledge of ever having known someone with a cancer diagnosis because they're young.
Yeah.
Give me some scenarios where there was a good reaction, as a learning moment.
I think that with cancer, a lot of people, there are like a few pretty typical responses that are wrong. And one of them is like, they don't want your gree-gree. It's like they act like if they look at your cancer straight on, make eye contact with it, like it's going to come for them next. And so they don't want to talk about it. They just kind of dance around it and obliquely ask if you're okay. That's not cool. And then there's also the pity response, which is such a bummer. But I have a really close friend that I have known since we were kids. We were in high school, and he is not on social media at all. So like that cuts down on our interaction. But he came up to visit, and we went to a concert together a couple of months ago. And he was like, so give me the update, what's going on. And I told him, kind of what my last scan results were like. And he listened. He didn't interrupt me. And then when the conversation came to a natural pause where I'd kind of given him the skinny, he was like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry for me. Like, I'm just so mad about this, that this is happening to you. And he gave me a hug and he was like, so what's next for you in your treatment? He asked a follow-up question and it wasn't like, okay, now that part of the conversation's over. We can move on to real life now. And I think that that's also what a lot of people do is they act like they're going to catch you on the flip side. Like they can just ignore you for a while. And then when you're healthy again, they'll pick their relationship back up with you. But we're not scary, like it's not like you get a standard issue like headscarf and wheelchair and you're just like feeble, totally different person all of a sudden. I don't know, Amy, you went through it. You were somebody who did have that chunk of your life be cancer. How did people do it right for you when you were like visibly ill?
I think before cancer, I was somebody who thought, oh, if somebody's brother dies, I don't want to be like, hey, I heard your brother died. I'm so sorry. And then make them think about their brother dying and then put them on the spot and make them feel emotional in front of me when they might be caught off guard. But once I actually went through something and had the experience of the big thing that people don't know how to discuss, I realized when people don't bring it up, it is already all I'm thinking about, right? And so by not just saying the thing that's already real, like, yes, the brother is dead. That's the thing that just happened. Why are you not acknowledging it? It's weird or not to, right? I remember maybe a week and a half after being diagnosed when I told my closest friends and a few of my girlfriends who probably aren't listening to this, but if you are, I'm not mad. They were like, let's all just go to dinner, like, let's just go. And we did. And I knew they were all getting together to be a support for me, and so we went to this place and I just remember sitting there as we were all sitting down and getting settled and chatting and looking at menus and like nobody acknowledged anything about me and the diagnosis, or like there wasn't even just like a reach across the table to my arm and be like, hey, or like, oh, it's so good to see you, or like, I can't wait to talk about, or just something. It was just like 5 or 6 minutes of like chatting about
like, should we get apps?
Yeah. Or like, oh, my husband has this thing tomorrow, so I have to wake up, like small talk. Let's not make it awkward. Let's fill the space. And I was sitting there being like, I have cancer. I'm going to have chemo. I'm going to have this. I'm freaking, and I just wanted to scream, or just like, I was like, so do I need to be the one to be like, so yeah, I went to my oncologist for the first time, like, so that's more work for me to then bring this thing out. But it was surprising to me because I thought in that situation, I would have been like, thank you for not putting me on the spot about this terrible thing going on, So I was surprised by my own way of being in the world with it, because it was like, this is happening, whether I like it or not, this is real. And so like, there's nothing that we can polite our way around or awkward our way around to make it better. But some things that did really help though were people just offering things that did not put me in a situation where I had to ask.
Yeah.
Like what?
There's a difference between, hey, if you ever want me to go grocery shopping for you, I'm really happy to go. I go once or twice a week anyway. It's no problem. Just let me know what groceries you need. There's no chance in hell I'm going to call that person and be like, when are you going to the grocery store next? Even though I know they mean it, I just don't have the time to ask people for favors. And it becomes a situation where I'm asking for the favor. If you call me and say, hey, I'm at Trader Joe's right now, and I'm actually have to go by your house when I leave. Do you want me to pick you up anything on the way? It's seriously no big deal. I'll be like, yeah, peanut butter pretzels.
Or like, give me your grocery list. Yeah.
Like, I'm going now, do this. Don't make it be a thing where like, if you ever want a pizza, just let me know. Like, I'm never going to call you and say, I want a pizza. Just say, I'm ordering pizza for you. What kind do you want? Is tonight good or do you want it tomorrow? Another friend said, I'm sending a house cleaner to your house. That was like one of the coolest things somebody could have done for me. I had like a really young, like, kid, barely over 1 at the time. And like, just to alleviate something like that, it was so generous. And
also like that's the solution for if you're somebody that doesn't know what to say, if you're somebody that's not going to be like, a shoulder to cry on necessarily. And that's fine. Like, not everybody is like that. Play to your strengths. Be the person that's like, I'm at Trader Joe's. Send me your grocery list. Share a note with me and I'll get everything. See you later. Don't even have to answer the door.
Right.
Enjoy. Like that's fine. And we don't expect everybody to be these like flowing wells of empathy where they're going to say all the right things and do all the right things. But even going so far as just to say, like, this is freaking me out. I don't really know how to deal with it. Like, I'm scared for you. It's really horrible. Like,
Yeah.
like that's how we're feeling too. And so it's okay. I think just again, like being authentic with people and being honest about your limitations as a friend or a family member, like we understand because we don't suddenly have all the answers. But it just, I think, is so difficult when you're put in the position as the cancer person to like manage people's emotions about it. And like Amy said, ask for the favors. Like, we're not going to do that. Nobody's going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as a cancer person, I do think we have to have a little bit of understanding and grace for people for messing up, because it is a minefield. People do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing all the time. And if we really do nitpick every little thing and get offended, we're going to be even more mad than we should be. So I try to let things roll off my back, and I try to understand that nobody quite, these are uncharted waters for many people, and they're dealing with people like Tina, you were saying earlier, the psychology behind everyone's cancer experience. I was actually thinking today, if you were somebody who had a hard life and bad things just happen to you and you've just like kind of get the short end of the stick frequently, and then you get a cancer diagnosis, your reaction might be, of course this happened to me. And anything that goes along with your, oh, now I need chemo. Of course I need chemo. I don't just get to have this type of treatment, Whereas if you're somebody who always has had just luck, and, you kind of were born into some easier demographics perhaps, and you might feel entitled to that luck because it's all you've ever known, or to even think it's luck, or just what you are, and nothing bad happens and things get taken care of and work out in the end. And then suddenly you get cancer. Holy cow, that completely puts you in this tornado where you don't even know what's up. And then suddenly the learning curve of like, there's no chance I'll ever get cancer because I'm me and that just doesn't happen to me, to having cancer, and suddenly your entire world is like, of course, now I'm this cancer person, like this happens to me and now I'm going to die. And now that, like you kind of don't know where to get off, where you're like, I don't know. It's like for every single person, it's so different, but all we know is it's not fun, no matter who you are.
Well, I've been doing cancer care since 2000 or so. And so I know it from a clinical perspective, an academic perspective, and certainly I've known thousands of patients, and some of whom I've gotten to know their entire families. And so I've been there. Of course, it's been in my family as well, so my father had cancer. So I know it from an outside perspective. And I ask you that question kind of on purpose because it doesn't scare me. And I'm a clinician. So
Yeah.
What I think I hear both of you saying, and I think would be useful for people to remember, is to let their own ego go in that moment and just be present for the person and be present to receive the information, but don't put it through their own filter and say, oh yeah, this is what cancer means in my world, so let me bring that back to you. and
Right, exactly.
And make sure that's a relevant point in our conversation. Right? I guess it's not just let your own self go for a moment and just listen to your friend or your loved one. And know that that's all that really you have to do at that moment of discovery, I guess. Yeah. And that's the big moment. I think that's when people kind of panic and they put it through the filter and they say something stupid because they want to say something.
Yeah. I think that it goes even to clinicians too. I mean, when I was waiting for the results of my PET scan and bone scans that were diagnosing me with metastatic disease, my oncologist called me, and it was like, I don't know, 8:00 at night. And I had just met this woman, but I could tell she's like kind of my age. And obviously, we probably just demographically have some similarities. She had obviously been given the assignment to break this horrible news to somebody over the phone. And she was like, your case is a really hard one for me. We have kids the same age. I feel like we're at similar places in our lives. I want you to know that I'm taking this personally. Like, I care about you as a person. And that to me was so important. It was the best thing that she could have done. Reach across all of her professional guidelines, grab my hand virtually as a person, as just another human in the world going through a shitty thing, and say, I see you, I see your humanity, and I'm going to do my best for you. And I have carried that with me. She's still my oncologist. She's a wonderful part of my life. But, I think that that's the thing is like, you don't have to have all the answers, whether you're somebody like I am, who's like a classic fixer, I want to have like a great idea that you haven't thought of yet. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to hear your great idea about their cancer. Nobody wants your recommendations. They just want to be seen as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that we had talked about discussing, I don't want to say tips and tricks or whatever, like of navigating the system. And that could be like its own show. I mean, that's truly, that could be like its own podcast. Were there things that you discovered throughout all of this that you're like, wow, I wish someone had told me that in advance?
I mean, I think we can talk from like the really big things, like getting a second opinion and what that actually entails that I did not understand when I was being diagnosed, to the tiniest little details like Steph has learned from certain Mets online groups that she's a part of, that the Target brand Imodium is generic brand is better for diarrhea control than the name
Then
brand.
the brand? Really?
Like, yeah, but then I guess it stops working eventually for people oftentimes. But right, that's like a tip. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's the kind I get. Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're smaller pills. Hot tip. There you go.
But along the lines of second opinions, though, that's something I thought you do if you don't like your doctor, or if something seems fishy about like what they're diagnosing or what they think is going on. And I loved my oncologist. I was like, great. My doctor, my general doctor, had said she's who I would go to. She's great. And then I met her and I was like, yes, signed, sealed, delivered. And then she recommended the surgeon for me. My oncologist did. So I said, great. I had made an appointment for another surgical appointment with somebody else. And I loved my first surgeon so much that I just canceled the second appointment. And later someone was like, well, you should still go just to talk. And I was like, no, I really love this surgeon. But I didn't realize every single second opinion does not mean you're dumping your oncologist, does not mean you're dumping your surgeon. It is just more information. And then when you're processing a diagnosis or a new part of treatment, even to hear it explained to you in a different way can help you so much. Like perhaps that other surgeon would have, I might have just liked her just as much, first of all, who knows, but she could have used some metaphor that explains something better, or explains something about my particular disease or the genetics of my tumor that perhaps no one else had told me yet. And I think if you hear the exact same recommendation that your chosen team is telling you, and this person's echoing it, it just gives you so much confidence later on. And here I am, almost 2.5 years out from the treatment stuff, thinking, should I have done this part of my surgery? Should I have just gotten the mastectomy? Or like, should I have, stuff that I think is fine, but had I had that echoed to me, perhaps there would just be no question. And I think that's really valuable. And I don't know, I think people are afraid to hurt their oncologist's feelings, perhaps, but they don't care. There's no feelings. They expect it. Your insurance wants you to do it because your insurance is going to save money in the end if you get the best care. So there's really no downside. And also, if you don't jive with your doctors originally, break up, get the second opinion, find a team you like, because whether you like it or not, it's going to be a long relationship.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I've heard patients who have come for second opinions say, I didn't understand my stage. I didn't understand the treatment options until Dr. So-and-so explained it. And yeah, just having those, it could be like you're saying, the exact same treatment plan that's being discussed, but just one person is able to relate more to the patient where they are and explain things. It's huge. And that can get somebody to actually change where they're going to treat, because they want to treat with the doctor who can speak to them directly, you know?
And it might be a doctor who's way more into the most up-to-date studies and clinical trials and different things, and they might recommend something that you then do take back to your original person who might agree with them. You know,
Yeah.
There's no downside to more info from a professional who specializes in your type of cancer.
I think that's key, Amy. I think if you're going to get a second opinion, you don't go down the hallway at the same cancer center, right? You go to what we call a high volume clinic. So that it's usually a larger city, someone who does whatever cancer someone has, that cancer all day long. You know, you could have multiple myeloma, which is not a really common cancer, but there are doctors who that is all they see, and they will always know more than anyone in a community clinic. And what's amazing, and I don't think people realize this, is medical oncologists in community clinics are very aware that there are specialists doing a certain cancer all day long in the big cities or academic centers. They're perfectly fine letting that other specialist create the treatment plan and executing that plan locally and working with them hand in hand. And so they might call the shots, but it's being actually done in the community clinic down the road from you or in your own hometown. That happens all the time. And it's not only okay, it's expected. I mean, because if you ask the local oncologist, what would you do if this were your mother, daughter, sister, brother, whatever, they would think to themselves, well, sure, I'd go to the specialist in the big city.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is totally normal. And I always tell every patient, about second opinions when they're afraid of hurting their own doctor's feelings. I tell them that in order to become a medical doctor, they have egos that will stay intact with this. This is okay. They can handle it.
Well, yeah, because getting a cancer diagnosis, like going to see your oncologist, and it's like big first day of school vibes, right? You don't want to call attention to yourself. You don't want to get on their bad side because like your life is hanging in the balance. And like, I think that we do want so badly to just cling to this person who's going to save our lives. But, you know, the reality is you can relax a little bit. They're not taking it personally. They're used to it. You're not the first person with this that they've seen, hopefully. And it could be that they've told you wrong. And if that's the case, then get out of there. I mean, I think that a second opinion saved my life for sure. Or at least gave me a lot more time than I would have had. I would have had an unnecessary surgery that would have had really disturbing results. I would have woken up to really bad news. And I'm very glad that I went for that second opinion outside of my community clinic. So yeah, highly, highly recommend second, third opinions. But also knowing that something I heard from, I do a lot of webinars because I am that kind of person. And something that I heard from Otto Metzger, who's like one of the world's leading specialists in lobular breast cancer, which is the type I have, he said he gets a lot of referrals for second opinions. He was like, of course, I'm happy to do them. But one thing that I have to always remind people is that I don't know you. Your oncologist sees you, they see your ups and downs, hopefully that they're able to follow you closely enough that they can tell when you're having a bad day. And he was like, I'm seeing you on this one day. I don't know if you're better than usual, worse than usual, if your pain level is different. And he was like, I just kind of have to take what the patient is telling me. And so I'm going to base my treatment plans and my recommendations on where you're at in time today. And that doesn't necessarily reflect the whole picture. He has said also that obviously imaging and scans and all of that are a great tool, but how you feel is also a really great tool. It doesn't matter if your scans say that you're in dire straits. If you're feeling overall pretty good, you know, you don't have to necessarily be treated like you're on death's door. If you're feeling okay for the moment. And the reverse is true also. If you are feeling really bad, but your scans say that you shouldn't be, obviously you're going to want to treat the person that's feeling really bad to alleviate those symptoms. And so I think finding somebody who's able to see you as the patient, an individual, and not just your blood work and your imaging, I think that's something that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
As far as a tip and a trick that I really love, I have to give a shout out to cancer meme culture. I think that it's one thing to like be sat down and be like, your neutrophils are low and you have low platelets, and just hearing all of these things coming at you, whether or not you're able to absorb that, I guess depends on you as a person. But there are a lot of cancer meme accounts that are really funny, and they give you a lot of important information in kind of a sneaky way. Like, I was lucky not to learn this from a meme, but from Amy. But anybody who's had an MRI might know this sensation. You feel like you're peeing your pants. Your crotch gets very warm.
When you're getting the contrast, right?
Yeah.
Once it goes through your body. But if they don't warn you and suddenly you're laying in this machine and you feel the sensation like you've just peed somehow.
You legit feel like you have peed your pants. Like,
You're like, how am I going to get up? What do I have a sweatshirt to tie around my waist? Like, and then if you know, you're like, oh, it's the contrast.
Oh, there it is.
Pee.
Yep.
It's not true.
But there are like memes about this feeling, you know? There's like when that contrast hits and it's like a meme about your crotch feeling hot.
Mm-hmm.
And like low neutrophil memes, like it's a way to make it less scary, less intense, more digestible, I think, for regular people.
And there's camaraderie there.
I was going to say, again, it's that less alone, right? It's like, I'm not the only one who experiences this. Like, this is a common thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of MRI, what music do y'all listen to in the MRI?
Do you want to tell them about our list?
You have a list that's the MRI list?
Well, we asked our listeners to give us their favorite songs for feeling like hyped, kind of, you know, just like getting through what helped you feel good and what kind of pumped you up when you were going through treatment, or even, you know, now still for people who are out of treatment, still going through treatment. What songs are your like hype jams? And they gave us this amazing list. We turned it into a Spotify playlist. And so I actually listened to it, which is a break in tradition. I listened to it for my last scans, even though previously I had a superstition about listening to the Big Thief song Not on repeat. The first couple of times my scan texts were like, what? They actually, this is a running joke on the podcast, always mishear it as Big Keef, who is a rapper. Very different vibe. But I listened to this song over and over, and that was what I did. But we have this really great playlist now. And it is all different types of music, but it's good. It's really good. I like listening to it. We also have another playlist that's for when you're feeling like you just need a good cry.
You really want to lean into wallowing and
Yeah.
you know, I think it's good to let it out. So we collected all of the saddest cry songs. So maybe we can give you links to both those playlists for the show notes if you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's just say you had a magic wand for a day and money's no object. There's no object to what you could possibly accomplish, and you could make the perfect place. Obviously, if you had a magic wand, you'd get rid of cancer, but let's just assume that's not possible with this wand. I'm saying you could make a cancer center to treat cancer in a way that you think would be most ideal. So maybe you win billions of dollars in a lottery or something, and you can create this. So what would it look like? Because, of course, I'm thinking integrative cancer care.
Yeah.
But that's me. So what would it be from your perspective?
Hugely integrative cancer care would be very high on my list. I go to a naturopath, an acupuncturist.
Do either of you get massage?
My insurance doesn't pay for it, but I would put that on the list.
Yeah, mine either.
And it's so unfair.
Yeah, they won't pay for it unless it's through a physical therapist.
Yeah, mine used to do it if I paired it with my chiropractor, who I also see actually in the integrative care area. But here's what I would put in my cancer care clinic is a pool, an indoor pool.
Yes.
Because so many of the side effects that cancer treatment causes and medications, anything, some of our bones feel just sore, our joints. If you're like me and you're put into early menopause to combat my estrogen levels and I take an AI, like I just feel like I'm 90. And swimming in a pool, moving your body, we all know that moving our body as much as we can lower cancer risk, cancer recurrence, cancer progression, all of that stuff. And it's so hard to do it when you just feel like you're 90. So having, I want like old lady aerobics classes in a water
Yes,
pool.
water aerobics.
And like, can it be warm water?
Yes, it is warm and it is
Yes.
indoors. We don't care about the weather.
And everyone can wear the flower hats?
Yes. Essential.
There's actually a girl in town that I've met through cancer who leads the synchronized swimming group in Portland. I think they're called like the Rose City Raindrops or something adorable, but they go do and synchronized swimming stuff in their little caps, like in the river and different places and do events. And I am trying to start a breast cancer synchronized swimming group with her where she can be our coach.
That's amazing.
That would be awesome.
From what I've heard, it's also being in the water also can help with people who have lymphedema because of the pressure of the water. There's so much benefit. I love that idea.
Okay, so I know some of my things. I attended Bastyr University, and so Bastyr is like heaven on earth to me. They have this beautiful cafeteria with all like plant-based foods. They have large gardens. They have a beautiful sunny courtyard, and they have housing. I think that there are a lot of things that, allopathic doctors don't necessarily think about because they're so focused on problem solving, which is wonderful. That's what we pay them for. But I think that integrative stuff that even goes beyond what we think of, like acupuncture and aromatherapy and, herbalism and things like that, like all of that I think is important. But like Amy said, having a pool, jacuzzi, saunas, because like all of these things I feel like can really make you feel more embodied. Like that's something I've struggled with, is feeling kind of like a floating head whose body has betrayed her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to acknowledge my body. I am only just now 2 years in getting to the place where I feel like I can really be back in line kind of and thinking more about my body as something that has value and processes that aren't totally messed up. And the thing that's brought me back to that has been acupuncture. But I think that the feeling that you get when you're at your cancer center is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really lucky in that mine is a beautiful, bright place with lots of art and good snacks and everything. But I think that there's still a lot of room for improvement. Like, green space means so much to people. It brings up your mood, and offering dietary help because people need it. There's so much that you have to learn when you're diagnosed with cancer. I have been vegetarian my entire life. And so I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I don't need a nutritionist. But then my registered dietitian for oncology was like, actually, the way that you're eating is the worst possible way for somebody with chronic diarrhea. Because I had, of course, in response to my diagnosis, just started eating like massive amounts of raw vegetables and stuff. And he was like, that's just going to go right through you. Like, you're not absorbing any of those nutrients. And so I think that even people who think they've got it on lock need a lot of help. And just having a cancer center that offers all of that, in addition to obviously like the traditional methods of treating and curing cancer, and then also having places for people to stay, because it is such a burden on families and individuals to have to go back and forth. Like, I drive to Seattle every week, and like we're on a single income. My husband's a public school teacher. Like, sometimes gas money is tight, and like I think it's valuable to go down there for acupuncture every week. And obviously I don't have a choice about my treatment stuff, but I can definitely see people making a choice to skip or forgo those treatments because they can't get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that extends to like radiation and stuff, you have poorer outcomes, and that sucks. So just, having that place where people want to be and they want to feel safe and they feel open and they feel cared for as a whole person, not just like this glob of junk in your body you're trying to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say I have another one that this is a prediction and also what would be on my list, but I think that within 5 years, this will be something they offer in the infusion rooms. Virtual reality headsets when you're getting an infusion. I have one of those Oculus Quest things or whatever. And immediately when I started using it, I thought, why didn't I have this during childbirth to like let me escape, guide me through
That's
breathing,
a cool idea.
relax me, envision with like actual things that I'm seeing, like the baby lowering and stuff like that. So first of all, get that into labor and delivery rooms as soon as possible. But also just to being in the infusion room, getting chemo is surreal. And what's even more surreal about it is you get used to it. And like, it's like, how do you get used to this? But to have that escape where you can put on a movie that makes it look like you're in a movie theater. You could do a meditation where you're in a rainforest with calm music and you're seeing nice things. I don't know. There's clearly probably no science to this, but I could assume that feeling lower stress while you're in treatment situations would maybe lower the PTSD, like medical trauma that we get going through treatment. I don't know. I think it's just like a cool escape and you don't have to go anywhere. We could like start a nonprofit that brings headsets in cancer centers.
I like the virtual reality angle. I think it's already being used in medicine. It's already being researched for pain control and other things. So, yeah.
COVID has taken away so much of the possibility, I think, of cancer centers and hospitals in general, because it's just like so sterile. And obviously, we want hospitals to be sterile, but our cafeteria at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance is like so separated and they only have one dish available and you have to like serve it up yourself. It's just very like, don't look at anybody, don't breathe on anybody. And, I hope that maybe as we kind of get things under control as far as that goes, we can move back toward like looking people in the face at cancer centers and having support groups come back in person and stuff like that. Because I was on a wait list for acupuncture for 1.5 years because they had to abide by these like really strict COVID protocols because it could be like blood, in the exam rooms where they do the acupuncture. And so they were only seeing like 3 people a day and they had this waiting list a mile long. And not any old acupuncturist can take care of oncology patients. And so, it would just be great if that were an option for more people because it's really, really helped me and Amy too.
I refer people all the time to acupuncture. I'll just go down their list of side effects and I'll be like, well, it helps with this one and this one and this one and this one. You sure you don't want to try it? Well,
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it would be fake, but it's not, like you have to do it to believe it. You're like, oh, wow, like that doesn't hurt anymore. And it did hurt. So how did that work? I don't know, but I'm coming back.
It's magic.
It's magic. I recently started doing cupping too, like Gwyneth Paltrow's best friend.
So your acupuncturist is doing the cupping?
Yeah. There's like the kind that they pump that causes the suction. And then there's the kind that just like naturally has a suction and you can move them around. And he does the move around kind and then leaves them. And I kind of want that kind because the sucking ones, you like put them somewhere and then they stay. But anyway, it's really, really helped me. Like nothing else has. Chiropractor, even acupuncture hasn't helped in the same way. Yeah.
And I think that qualifies in one of those things that happens at cancer centers that you have to ask for. They don't always point out and say, oh, we have an acupuncturist we work with, or, it might not be under the same roof. It might be someone in the community, but I think that's something people can ask about at their cancer center and see who they're working with. Because you're right, oncology trained acupuncturists would be best.
I know, because there's so many things that seem like no problem here. And then you accidentally happen to like read a news article on some health website, like collagen, for example. Remember when I was freaking out about how I was told to take collagen, but then I somehow stumbled upon that it might actually not be great. You guys did a whole episode on this, but for cancer patients, if you're just going to anybody off the street and they're like, use weed for sleep, and then you're like, for your specific type of cancer, maybe that specific type of THC isn't good for you to be.
Or it's contraindicated with your medication.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And like when I saw my dietitian, he was like, the name of the game here is getting you to retain as much of the medication as you can. So if that means changing your diet, so it's primarily bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast, so you're bound up enough to keep those cancer drugs in you so you can absorb them, then that's what we're going to do, because, having glowing skin doesn't matter if you're dying of cancer.
Right. All that broccoli isn't going to do you any good if it's
Yeah.
making you poop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also find it really baffling in my own head sometimes thinking about like all of the stuff you're told to do for cancer prevention versus once you have cancer and wanting to either slow that cancer or stop it from coming back. Because sometimes those two are the same thing. But sometimes it's like, well, am I already so screwed that eating organic food isn't as important as just eating the vegetables? Like having the vegetables is more important than like the tiny bit of, quote unquote, safe chemicals that are on the broccoli. It's just more important to be eating, like, I don't know. I just like think about all of this stuff that it's like, which part is the prevention and which part is the once the horse is out of the gate already.
Well, my dietitian very rudely likes to remind me that I can still get other kinds of cancer, which is like, what? Excuse me?
See, the fact that we can laugh about that is part of what I love about having friends with like cancer experience. Laugh.
Well, to your point, Amy, this is something I harp on all the time because I do lectures out there to other naturopathic docs and stuff. And I am adamant about a reassessment of everything after the diagnosis, because the process from normal tissue to cancerous tissue is one thing biologically. And then once cancer is present and whether it proliferates, spreads, how it acts, whether it is capable of doing that or whether it's dormant and being held in check by the immune system, that's a new beginning. And then we look at all the evidence for every agent that you use for prevention in a new light, because it's not just what the agent is, but what dose somebody is taking it at that will affect the biology. So it's a really intriguing question because I think it's something we can somewhat answer. But my pet peeve is when we take things that we know are preventative and extrapolate it into the world of once cancer has been diagnosed. You cannot extrapolate. It's a hard line, hard stop, reassess. Is it okay now? So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah.
Well, do a whole episode on it because it's fascinating to me.
I could do a whole like coursework on it.
Please,
because it's so
do it. It would be really useful. Honestly, I would love it.
It's one of those things it's tough even for me. I actually reassess every time. Like, okay, that's a good question. B6 in your particular type of cancer, is this okay? Is B12 okay in your particular type of cancer? Because every cancer is named for the organ it comes from, but they're different entities. Biologically, they're different. So you have to look at every single one. And, prostate's not a breast, and a breast's not a colon, and colon's not a lung, and et cetera, et cetera.
And the science is moving so fast that it just would be silly if we weren't constantly reassessing all of these dietary things. And people have access now. Like one of the coolest things I think about Twitter and the internet is like, you can go online, you can find the person who worked on the study, and you can say, hey, your study is paywalled. Can you just like send it to me? And they'll send it to you. And then you can read about it. And of course, that's dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. But I also think that it's really valuable for you to be able to be like, hey, I'm interested in this, and then bring it to your oncologist and be like, hey, I'm kind of wondering if this might be a supplement that would help me. And they can be like, absolutely not. I already know about it. Or they can say like, hey, let's learn about this. I don't know. I'll make some calls. Because, like you said before about the ego thing, like, I think you have to understand when you're either a cancer person or a cancer provider that like the info is always coming at you. It's always changing. And that works in our favor when we're thinking about survival rates. Medicine is always changing. Info is being updated, and you have to just understand that like you don't know everything, and you don't even know what you don't know because it's always changing, and there are always people coming new to discovery and new to medications. And I don't know, it gives me a lot of hope.
I'm smiling because I have a refrain in my head that I don't know where I came upon it or if I sing-songed it one day, but it's reassess, put your ego to the test.
Yeah.
And I live by it.
I love it. So
I
good.
wish more doctors were like that.
Mhm.
Discovery demands that we have it, right? You
Yeah.
have to. New discoveries can't happen if you already think you know the answers.
Right, right.
Was there anything else that y'all wanted to talk about, to promote or anything before we wrap this up?
I would just say if you are interested in checking out the podcast, we're anywhere podcasts can be found. If you just search for Cancer for Breakfast, and we're on Instagram and Twitter. We have a website, and you can always write us a letter. We'll read it on the podcast and gab about it. And yeah, we love the Cancer Pod so much, and thank you guys so much for having us. This is so fun.
Thank you for coming on. I could sit here forever.
We'll have you on our show.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I know. What a treat. It was so cool to talk to you too. And yeah, we'll just continue on our podcast.
Yeah, we'll pick it up where we left off.
We should have a real
Yeah.
cliffhanger and then have the big reveal on Cancer for Breakfast.
That's not a bad idea. Yeah. Yes. Thank you both for joining us and taking the time out to be here on the Cancer Pod. This has been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, we could have talked forever.
Yes, we could.
The Cancer Pod for Breakfast. It's a mashup. It's like what the kids do with the songs. We had a mashup.
Yeah. And I think that, building community around cancer care is so important. And I think it's important for everyone involved. I think that, whether you've had cancer or you're a caregiver, finding support and community, it's important. And I think that's what they're all about. So kudos.
Absolutely. And as always, if you want to listen to our podcast, well, you're listening to it right now, obviously, but you can subscribe. You can subscribe anywhere that podcasts are streamed.
And I got to tell you, Leah, for the record, we have people all around the world. 10% of our listeners are in Europe.
We're international, y'all.
Lots of people in the United States, because that's where we're based. But we have folks in Canada, Australia, Europe. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, so share this with your friends, your family, people in your support group.
Speaking of support group.
Yeah, we're keeping a theme here. And you can always buy us a coffee. For those who don't know, there's a link in our show notes, and it just kind of helps us keep this going and, I don't know, pays for artists and hopefully one day an editor. We keep saying that.
Yes, we're getting there.
Social media people. Yes, so it keeps the content coming.
Hey, and if you're a social media person who wants to join us and spread the word, or you are an editor of any kind for podcasts, then shout out. Send us an email. We're interested. We need to find someone, but we want to find someone who's interested in what we're doing too. So it'd be a win-win.
On that note, I'm Dr. Leah Sherman.
And I'm Dr. Tina Kaiser.
And this is the Cancer Pod.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Cancer Pod. Remember to subscribe, review, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media for updates. And as always, this is not medical advice. These are our opinions. Talk to your doctor before changing anything related to your treatment plan. The Cancer Pod is hosted by me, Dr. Leah Sherman, and by Dr. Tina Kaiser. Music is by Kevin MacLeod. See you next time.
We should just cut this. Who gives a shit?